Sean here from BaseMint Comics. And after this game, I'm going to get Hank ready and we're going to pedal up to our comic shop. It's Wednesday, September 3rd, and we're going to hit the trails to pick up our new books. And we're back from the ride. We picked up our new books at the shop and grabbed a couple of back issues. So I was going to go through those really quickly. So first off, I picked up Laura Kinney Wolverine number 10, Magic number 9, and Wolverine number 13. And the reason why I'm lumping all of those together is because I am an X-Men completionist, but I have been like absolutely working on trying to not be, because some of the books just really aren't doing it for me. And so I think that just story-wise, it sort of worked out that these are going to get taken off of my pull list just by the stories kind of wrapping up. I kind of flipped through number 10 of like everything seems to be ending. These feel a little bit like they're, when like Marvel announces some new like status quo, you just kind of know that those books are then just like a little bit treading water. And that's kind of how these feel, where it's like nothing's really happening in them that's blowing my socks off. And I know that Age of Revelation is coming up next month. And so all of these look like they're kind of ending and going to be replaced, obviously, by titles during that like run. But I don't know if these titles are going to be picking up after that. And I don't know if I'm going to be carrying on with them after that, because these are definitely falling into the I might toss them in a to sell at shows or on eBay or whatever pile. After that, Doctor Strange number 450. This is following up on the Asgard storyline, the One World Under Doom, where he is the sorcerer in Asgard, and it looks like they just announced there's going to be a new Doctor Strange #1 coming out in December. So I imagine that this is tying into that. And it's looks like it's a bunch of vignettes, short stories, but it's got a J. Michael Straczynski story in it and a Roger Stern written story in it. So I'm sure those are going to be pretty good stuff. Up next that I grabbed was Imperial War Exiles. This is probably the title out of Imperial War that I'm most excited about because I'm a big fan of the Shi'ar, the Imperial Guard, and Xavier and Lilandra. And so I'm excited to see a little bit more about their daughter and whatever is happening in this title. Art looks pretty good, and like I said, it's got the Imperial Guard in it, so that's always exciting. Up next, Avengers number 796, or 30 of this volume, but Legacy number 796. And last issue, they finally let you in on what the missing moment was, and I thought the reveal of that was pretty cool. And it kind of leads right into this. And so I've really been enjoying this Avengers book. I like the fact that Storm's on the team. I think she's a good addition to the Avengers. And that's been a lot of fun. I like McKay's writing, and I've been enjoying Avengers. I'm not the biggest Marvel Zombies fan, but I also like alternate reality stuff, so I'm sure this is going to be a good time. And then picked up Amazing Spider-Man number 975. I've been looking forward to this, kind of seeing what they're going to do with this split or torn, as it's called, Spider-Man, where there's two Spider-Mans. One's the street level and one's kind of cosmic, floating around. Pretty interested to see where that goes. I've been digging Joe Kelly's run on the book. Ramita Jr., who I love, is doing the front end of the book, and then it looks like Pepe Larraz, who is fantastic. I think there's... Is there? No, it's on the other side. You can't see it in this shot. But on that wall, there's a very... I met Pepe Larraz in 2019 at Chicago Comic-Con, and so we signed an X-Force print when he was working on that right before he popped on to House of X, Powers of X. Up next, Uncanny X-Men number 720, or number 20. And this is written by Gail Simone. This is probably my favorite title of the From the Ashes era. I'm really enjoying Gail Simone's run on the book. Gambit, obviously, like Nightcrawler's my all-time favorite X-Men, but as a kid, my first favorite X-Men, due mostly to the cartoon, was Gambit. I dressed up for him as Halloween in 1993. I have a photo of that. Let me grab that. That's me and my best pal in the Halloween of 1993. I've had it confirmed by Fabian Nicizier that that's got to be the first Deadpool cosplay. Was my pal in 1993. And so that was our last Halloween dressing up, we were Gambit and Deadpool. So Simone's run is kind of like harkening back to the days of Generation X for me, which was like my New Mutants. Like when I got into comics, they were the first wave, like X-Force was already established. So Gen X was my like gateway. Like I was a teenager when they were teenagers. And I kind of loved the way that that team was like organically brought together in the Phalanx Covenant. Like you got introduced to single members in issues. And it wasn't kind of like I really like the new X-Men Academy X kids, and the whole Xavier school was actually a school again. But the thing that I really liked about Gen X was kind of the slow roll of getting to know like Sync, Monet, Husk, Skin through that event, like slowly. And I like the fact that there's only like the 4 new kids on this, because it's definitely getting you time to get to know them. So out of all the X books right now, this is hands down my favorite, which has a lot to do with the fact that Gambit and Nightcrawler are also main characters. But and then probably the book that Hank and I were most excited for, even though he's never watched the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, he is only familiarized with Spidey and his amazing friends, is Spider-Man 94, which is following up on the cliffhanger of the animated series, which I loved immensely. It was my number 2 favorite cartoon of the 90s, behind X-Men. But this is James DeMatteis and Jim Toe doing art. Looks really good, and J.M. DeMatteis is a fantastic Spider-Man writer, so I am excited to see what he does with this. And then as far as the back issues go, I picked up Daredevil number 177. I have Daredevil from 179 forward into the into the 300s, and I have the Frank Miller run in these trades, but since I have 79 through 84 in issues, I have a good chunk of this trade, which starts at number 173. So I've just been trying to slowly but surely, when I find them not expensive, and I can get them on the cheap. I much prefer the smell of newsprint over fancy trades, even though these ones are actually pretty. They're not like super glossy or Marvel Masterworks appeal, so paper quality. So these are a little bit more my speed, but I definitely would prefer single issues copies. So looks like I've only got a few left to finish this trade, and then I can hand this off to some youngster on Halloween and hopefully get them hooked on Daredevil. And then the last back issue that I picked up was Invincible Iron Man Annual number 5, which was the last of the annuals that I need to get from the time period that I have Iron Man collected, which is from issue 98 to somewhere in the early 300 Teen Tony era. I wanted to get the Michelini, Layton, Romita Jr. run, and did that last year, and then saw that there was like a pretty solid like Denny O'Neil run after that, so I was just like, hey, I'll try, and I've been picking those up at shows, and I noticed the other day that I was missing this, so I was happy to pick that up. It looks like this is the Black Panther, Iron Man and Wakanda story, and it looks like Madam Slay resurrects Eric Killmonger in this issue, so that should be a good one, with pencils by Jerry Bingham. So those are the books that we picked up on our bike ride. So next, we're going to kick it over to the Cornerbox Classics section, and I'm going to talk about the books that were released on October 27th, 1981. All right, so I'm seated next to the spinner rack and in between my little Banff doll. Obviously Nightcrawler, my favorite. There's a Nightcrawler Alan Davis sketch that I got back there. So I'm going to talk about the books that were released October 27th, 1981. So if I was pedaling up to the shop to pick up books off of a spinner rack, these were the ones that I would have chosen for that week. So up first is Amazing Spider-Man number 225. Pretty great cover of a bunch of Spideys swinging around and attacking a giant fool killer. This one's titled Fools Like Us. It was written by Roger Stern with art by John Romita Jr. The inks were done by Bob Wyacek, letters by Joseph Rosen, and colors by Glennis Ween or Glennis Oliver. So this one is kind of following up on the thread that's been running through Spider-Man of there is a serial killer running around who sends letters basically calling people fools. And so there's 2 FBI agents who aren't on the case, but they got letters sent to them because I guess they really kicked off the case or whatever. And so they're tracking down the fool killer, and he gets the jump on him and winds up vaporizing both of them. And then it cuts to Pete's at school. He's a TA, and there's a new student, Greg Salinger, and he occasionally sets off Pete's spider sense, which gives you a pretty good hint of he's probably the fool killer. So at one point when this happens, he's talking to Pete and he's explaining that he was late for class because there's something that's been going on with like his scholarship in the admissions office. And so Pete's like, oh man, it's probably those fools down and you know, once he says fools, it sets this dude off, sets Pete's spider sense off. So he starts to piece it together that like, oh man, this could be the guy. So he goes down, swoops in, rescues the people working in the admission office that the Fool Killer's going after, but the Fool Killer escapes. And it's a little bit of an interesting kind of ending, just kind of showing how crazy this dude is, because he runs into a homeless woman in an alley, and he's trying to hide out from Spider-Man, who's on his tail. And the woman screams, obviously, and he's like, "Lady, shut it. I'm trying to, like, I'll kill you. I'm trying to hide from Spider-Man so I can get the jump on him and take him out." And the homeless woman is like, "Hey, you'd be a fool to take on Spider-Man." And suddenly he's like, "Yeah, I would be." And so he tries to off himself because he's got to kill fools. And clearly he is one. So Spidey thankfully swoops in and saves the day. So there's none of that at the end of this issue. But it was a pretty fun story. You know, John Romita Jr. pencils at that time are outstanding. And it's a stern written Spider-Man, which is awesome. So up next, which is probably my favorite of this week, would be Daredevil number 179, called Spiked, released on October 27th, 1981, written and penciled by Frank Miller, with inks and colors by Klaus Jensen, and the letters also by Joseph Rosen. I have to, on a personal note, the reason why I started in October of 81 is because that's when I was born. And for the longest time, as I was tracking down, like, it was a personal goal of mine to get the, like, Marvel books that would have been released the month of my birth at shows and stuff. I was always bummed because there was, like, you know, it's not some, like, clean, cool look. I mean, this is a cool looking cover, but it's got the, you know, win a Columbia 10-speed Formula Racer above it. But ever since I got into comics as a kid, like, I have biked to every single comic shop that I've gone to over the years, comic shows through the years. Even when I go to conventions, like the Motor City convention has, like, a bike trail by it. So when I would wait for, like, artists to do art or whatever, if I was just killing time, I'd pack my bike with me and hit the trail and then come back to the thing. So bikes, obviously, you know, it's a whole part of the channel, and I love biking. So actually, in all actuality, I think it's pretty cool that all of these have that stamp on them. And I'm curious to, like, I would love to meet a person that actually won one of these while reading comics. That would be fantastic. Anyways, Daredevil 179, perfect little noir tale. Ben Urich is, like, he's meeting up with an informant who's explaining to him, like, kind of fulfilling a story that he's been writing about this Randolph Chira, who is running for mayor and clearly corrupt, clearly dirty, working with the Kingpin. And so he meets his, like, informant who's backing up his story in a movie theater, and all of a sudden the dude just, like, in this beautiful panel, the guy gets, like, poked, I'm gonna pull it out here, through the back, and you can see the shirt pop up because he's obviously Ben's side, and it's absolutely fantastic. Like, his eyes in that, it's just really, really good stuff. And so basically Elektra's like, "Hey, just killed that guy, and you're next if you don't back off from this story." And so in this, you learn that, like, Ben has clearly pieced together that he knows that Daredevil is Matt, but he's never going to print that story. And so he's freaked out by all this, meets up with Daredevil, and they agree to kind of continue on with the story, which of course pisses Elektra off. So Elektra comes after him and Daredevil. Elektra handedly beats Matt, and all of a sudden, like, Urich's, like, across the way taking photos for the Bugle for the story, and he coughs because he's a smoker, and it alerts Elektra to his presence, and he also gets the Psy treatment as this issue ends. And so just an absolutely fantastic story. I mean, there is nothing that I'm going to be able to say about Frank Miller Daredevil that, like, has not been said by comic book scholars. I've read the run probably twice in my lifetime, but have really kind of enjoyed doing it in the way that I am right now, of, like, as though I was a kid reading it, you know, with the other books that were coming out, because it really kind of, like, shows you. I know that, like, with new books now, there's stuff where I'm like, this is great, and this is okay, you know. I'd be hard-pressed to find comic books that I hate, because I can still manage to piece out stuff that I enjoy from pretty much everything. But it is kind of interesting. You know, I definitely prefer a lot of the quality and density of stories from back then. You know, you feel like you can spend 20 minutes reading a book, poring over the art, and stuff today is kind of very like compressed and written mostly for trade. And so it's just like reading that stuff kind of week by week as it's coming out. You know, you kind of see like who's really like cooking with gas there. You know, like the Claremont stuff in Uncanny and the Daredevil stuff right now are definitely the two tops out of what I'm reading. But speaking of a completely, I mean this with 100% sincerity, I absolutely love this title. I have read it twice through before in other X-Men reads. And I'm folding it into this Marvel read. I guess the thing that I'm doing with this is like, I obviously realize like I'm 43 and I've been reading comics for probably 35 years, somewhere in between there. And I've obviously been going to shows and like picking up, you know, dollar bin books and like trying to find, you know, fill runs. And as I do, I'm like, oh, one of these days I'm going to have the time to read all this. And then, you know, I've got a family, I've got a wife, got a job, got things to do. So now I finally like, okay, I have a lot of these runs like solid and I can do this, kind of read through the whole thing. And it's kind of making me like, I guess I'm hitting that point where like, I'm kind of looking at it like, I've gotta, if it's not stuff that is gonna like, I'm gonna pull down and reread again and again and again, I'm probably gonna like pass it on. Because I want the collection to be stuff that I can go anywhere in this huge room and pull stuff off the shelf and be like, this is the best of the best. And one of the series that I know gets a lot of grief from people, I absolutely adore, and that is Dazzler. I have read this series multiple times, and I love it. A little bit of a background: the songs that you hear that aren't like that actually have like lyrics and blah blah blah, and isn't just like the iMovie, you know, fill-in music. If you pay attention to those, is actually from the band that I was in, because YouTube can't mess with that. I own the rights. And I've worked with other bands that I'm friends with throughout the years, did a bunch of tours. That's where I got a lot of my comics from, was like touring around the country and going to different shops in between shows and stuff like that. So this book is like right up my alley. It's Dazzler's obviously trying to make it as a musician, you know, so the pitfalls of that, like the soap opera aspect of it. You know, when I was a kid, I got pneumonia one summer. Me and my mom both got, and I was like laid up all summer. It sucked. And I watched soap opera called Days of Our Lives with my mom, and I was like, oh, this is just comics. This is, you know, like I always joke with my wife, because my wife's a big Beverly Hills 90210 fan, and she had me watch the entire series with her, which is kind of a bummer because it doesn't have the right music. They don't have the rights to the actual like music that was out at the time that's in the episodes. So it's a little bit wonky, because like you can tell like where there's like, oh, if they were using this, you know, like I know one of the big songs that they used was like Man on the Moon by REM, maybe Night Swimming, I don't know. Anyways, there was a lot of like popular music at the time that was used in the shows that's just not available on the DVDs, and so it's weird. It's a little bit jarring. But the thing that I kind of kept on repeating was like, oh, Beverly Hills 90210 is just New Mutants, like without superpowers. Like Steve Sanders on that show is like Roberto DaCosta, just white and with a perm. Anyways, I'm getting off tangent here. So Dazzler, soap opera, music. In this particular story, there's this dude, the Tech Master, and he is going after Dazzler's manager, His name's Harry Osgood, and he's super pissed at Dazzler because he's booked her a bunch of gigs, but she flaked out. She was a no-show for him because she was picked up by Galactus, which is ridiculous to fight Terrax. And so he's pissed off at her, but needs her around because he's aware of her powers. And this guy is like a former employee that got messed up because Harry was trying to like cut corners, and he got all burnt up from some pyrotechnics issues. So he's pissed off, trying to kill Harry. And so that is the crux of the issue, is like this dude trying to get his vengeance on Harry. Towards the end of the book, dude kind of messes up and starts to fall to his death. And Dazzler's manager, Harry, rescues him. So the guy's like, all right, you saved my life. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to bother you anymore. And like, because Dazzler was there to help out, her and Harry have made up, and they're back to trying to book gigs together. So it's a ridiculous series, but I love it. I can't help it. Up next, Khazar the Savage, number 11, Children of the Damned. This is written by Bruce Jones. Beautiful pencils by Brent Anderson. Inks by Joe Rubinstein. Letters by Janice Chang. And colors by Don Warfield. And I am a big Khazar. Khazar falls under the X-Men umbrella because of the Savage Land to me. So I'm a pretty big Khazar fan. I do not have a ton of the old Khazar stuff. Most of my Khazar stuff is the Wade Kubert run from the late 90s. But the reason why I tracked these down is it is the first appearance of Belasco. And look at that beautiful art right there. That is a fantastic double page spread and introduction of Belasco. So he is obviously a huge antagonist in the Fantastic Magic miniseries, which I'm going to get to in a little bit when that pops up. I think it's 84, maybe. So I've got 2 years to get there, and we're going through this. So this is not my favorite issue of Khazar. It involves them going through the trials of Dante's Inferno, and there is an annual called Nightcrawler's Inferno, written by Claremont, that does it much better, but this is fully worth it for the introduction of Belasco and the beautiful Brent Anderson pencils. So I think I have the next issue, because that's like the end of this particular story, and then my Khazar stuff drops off until the 90s. Up next, Marvel 2-in-1, number 84, Cry for Beloved Canada, from October 27th, 1981. Written by Tom DeFalco, with beautiful Thing pencils by Ron Wilson, inks by Chick Stone, letters by Joseph Rosen, and colors by George Russos. And this involves Shaman has unleashed this dude, Ranark the Ravager. And so he's wreaking havoc in the hills of Canada. And Ben is on the way to see Sasquatch, Walter Lankowski, because he's an expert on radiation. And in previous issues of Marvel 2-in-1, I'm drawing a blank on if it's William Foster, right? That's Goliath. So Goliath gets radiation poisoning and he's dying, and Ben and Reed are trying to get this sorted out. And so he's like, oh, I'm going to go get this guy, Walter, from Canada and bring him back to try to help out Goliath and hopefully find a cure for him. And so while that happens, Ranark the Ravager is wreaking havoc. And so Alpha Flight, which like isn't really a team at this point, I think this is, so Vindicator showed up, or Guardian, whatever you want to call him, showed up in Uncanny X-Men 109. Alpha Flight shows up in 120, 121. And then I don't think you see them again until Machine Man number 18. Because again, I have all of Alpha Flight because they're X-Men adjacent. And so I think this is like the 5th or possibly 6th appearance, but it's obviously before they have their own solo title. So basically they're like, hey Ben, help us with Ranark the Ravager, and when we're done with that, we'll kick it over to Goliath and see what we can do. And so it's North Star that winds up coming to the rescue, because he like doesn't want to be a part of it, but then he wants to be a part of it. It's typical North Star behavior. And then then Walter goes back down after they've all wrapped this up, tries to help Goliath, but it doesn't work out. Or, I mean, it eventually works out, but Walter's not able to help, unfortunately. So then the final issue from that week in October of 1981 that I would have picked up would have been Spider-Woman number 42, The Judas Man, written by Chris Claremont, with art by Steve Laiola, inks by Bob Wiacek, letters by the wonderful, my favorite letterer of all time, Tom Orzechowski, and colors by Christy Scheel. I thought about picking up the entire Spider-Woman series. I know number one goes for some dumb prices because it's a number one or whatever. But I wound up I read a couple of the issues kind of surrounding the Claremont run, and it was like, it's okay, but not super my cup of tea. So I'm just sticking with the Chris Claremont stuff. And the Steve Laiola pencils are fantastic. Siren was introduced with this book. Has a lot to do with Silver Samurai. In this particular issue, Jessica Drew has she's got a client by the name of Pamela Kramer, and she has hired Jessica to track down her father. But it turns out that Silver Samurai and Viper are also after her father. So hilarity and comic book hilarity ensues, and they all wind up fighting and going after each other. And so that is this issue of Spider-Woman. So, like I said, not my favorite of the week, but anything drawn by Steve Laiola and written by Chris Claremont is definitely worth the price of admission, which in 1981 would have been 60 cents. And that's way better than the $3.99, $4.99, $7.99 that books are going for these days. All right, so that does it for this week's bike ride. New books that we picked up and the latest week of Cornerbox Classics. So thanks for watching. And if you like this, please comment down below if you enjoy any of the new titles, old titles, fan of bike riding, anything. Thought the song was terrible? Let me know. Do that in the comments. And if you could like and subscribe, I would also appreciate that. So thanks for taking this ride with us. Bye.